Hey guys, so in today's video, I want to have a chat about holidays and going on trips. And the reason why I wanted to do this video is because we recently went on a trip. We went to New York and North Carolina, and I always see that we tend to be in two different camps. So sometimes I see the people that tend to spend a lot of money on holidays, but then it's at a detriment to their financial goals. So they don't really have money to save or invest or anything like that, and they may even be using debt to fund those trips. Or you have people maybe in the other camp where all they do is save and they're not able, or they feel guilty more so around spending money on things like trips and holidays, or just, you know, anything that's discretionary. And so I'm a believer that you can do both, and this is something that I teach my clients as well. So I genuinely believe that yes, you can also spend your money on going on these trips and enjoy your life, but at the same time it doesn't have to be at a detriment to your financial goals. So you can still save and invest, and that's something that we've been able to do. So in this video I do have my phone, and what I want to do is talk about how we were able to save up for our trip as well as other things this year despite all of this high inflation going on, because the trip wasn't the cheapest, I would definitely say, but it's something that we were still able to do and we still had a lot of fun. And then I want to talk about the total cost of the trip. So I want to talk through some of the numbers in terms of how much we ended up saving and how much we ended up spending. So if you like the sound of that, then keep on watching. Okay, so first of all, let me talk about the reasons for this holiday. So for those of you who follow me on Instagram, then you may know that we actually had our holiday booked for our honeymoon. That kept getting cancelled last year, so we had to move it to this year because of things like the pandemic. So we did already have a trip planned for this year. However, earlier this year I have a business coach, and she basically told her clients that she would be holding a live event in North Carolina, and so I thought that was going to be an amazing investment for myself, and so I really wanted to go, and I was like, I will find the money somehow, I will plan for it, but I really want to go on this trip. And so I thought there's no point in me just going to North Carolina just for a day. So in my mind I went, well, how about we actually use this as a trip, and how about I drag my husband Yinka with me so that we can actually have a full-on holiday, especially because this was his first time going to the United States as well. And so that's what I decided to do. Now I should say that my husband is very much a saver, okay? If any of you guys know me, I talk about this on Instagram probably a bit more, but he's pretty much the saver in our relationship, whereas I'm actually the spender, which is ironic because I'm the one that talks about money on things like YouTube and Instagram. But essentially what I thought is that I would have to come with a plan. Like, I came with a proposal to him because I didn't want him to worry about like, oh, are we still going to be able to save for things and invest and all of that stuff. So what I first did was obviously tell him why I wanted to go on the trip, and for me, you know, actually being able to see my coach in real life, that will probably be one of the only times I will see her. And I also have family in New York as well, so I thought that would be a great chance for him to meet them. So when we're thinking about our other financial goals, now during this time we had actually been using quite a lot of money to invest. So we were investing in a lot of things, and also I was on a career break at that time as well, so there was quite a lot going on. So what I needed to do was think about, okay, well, how can this trip not derail our other financial plans? So how are we able to still save and invest for other things whilst being able to go on this trip? And so I obviously crunched the numbers, and so I came to Yinka and I kind of proposed like, this is what we could do if we do go on the trip, and I proposed like how much the total trip would cost. So for me, I think I budgeted around £3,000, which is honestly probably like $3,000 at this point in time. So I budgeted around that amount. And just to clarify as well, in terms of the total cost, what I was predicting is how much we would spend on everything. So that would include our flights, our accommodation. It would also include any travel as well to the airport, and also when we are on the trip, plus our spending money. So that's roughly how much I calculated when I was thinking about, you know, how much everything is going to cost. And then I also had a plan in terms of how we would be able to save for it. So I proposed that we just use the summertime to save for the trip, and then after that we can then focus on our other savings and investments. So within the year, what it would look like is the first kind of 5 months we spent mostly investing, then the next kind of 3 or 4 months we we would spend on the holiday, and then the next kind of 3 or 4 months, if my calculations are right, we would then spend on investing and also saving as well for a deposit. So that was kind of how the plan worked. And so I actually showed him, this is how much we can save towards the holiday each month in the summer, and that's how we'll be able to reach our goal. And so because of that, he was obviously very happy. He's kind of a logical person, so as long as you show him the numbers, he's okay. And so that's exactly what we did. So if you are subscribed to my channel, you may have seen some of our budget videos where they were purely focused really on saving for the holiday, and that was just because we were dedicating the summer holidays to literally just set money aside for the holiday, and then that's it. We don't need to think about it again. And yes, we ended up paying everything in cash, like we didn't need to use debt or anything to pay for it, and it's because we knew how to save, and I was very, very clear on the numbers as well. Okay, so let's basically talk about the trip itself. So we went for just under a week. So the plan was to spend around 3.5 days or 4 days in New York, and then another 3 days in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so in terms of how I actually planned for the holiday, in terms of how I booked everything with flights and accommodation, I actually ended up using British Airways. So I was trying to calculate, you know, was it more cost effective to book everything separately, so go on Skyscanner and try and book flights and then find accommodation separately, or would it actually be better to go for a package? And I basically did a hybrid of the two. So I found a really good deal on British Airways, and what I was able to do is actually book multiple flights, because we weren't just flying to one area. We would be going from London to New York, then New York to Raleigh, and then Raleigh back to London. So because of that, it felt a bit easier just to book it as a package. And so with British Airways, what I did is I booked the flights with them, but also I booked a hotel with them as well. And that hotel was for New York. So we were actually staying in Times Square, so pretty much in the central part, and actually it was a really nice hotel, but we were able to do that at a cheaper rate because we booked it as a package with British Airways. And so that's what we booked. And then separately, what I did is actually book an Airbnb for Raleigh, North Carolina. And the reason why I did that is because I had looked at the different hotels that British Airways was offering, and I didn't really like the hotels, to be honest. And since I was going to go to a live event, I thought Yinka would probably be more comfortable being in an Airbnb because there's things like a kitchen and obviously the TV and stuff like that. So I thought Airbnb will be best, and so that's what I did. I booked an Airbnb separately, and that was pretty much our flights and accommodation sorted out. Now, one of the things I will say is that being realistic with your numbers can be really helpful, especially because when we got to New York, I think about a week before, the pound had plummeted, right? So pretty much like $20 would be about 18 pounds. And so it felt really expensive when we got there because obviously the pound had plummeted, and just New York isn't cheap anyway, like it's quite an expensive place. And so being realistic with our numbers really helped us, because even though things were expensive, we could still afford them, right? Like we wanted to try out loads of different foods. So we wanted to try out different like pizzas, ice cream. We basically ate out every single day. Obviously we were staying in a hotel in New York, so we couldn't cook. That was the plan. I refused to cook. That's why I didn't get an Airbnb. And so again, with those numbers, I was realistic. So I was thinking, okay, how much roughly are we going to end up spending just on food? What kind of activities are we going to do? So for example, one of the things we wanted to do was go and see Central Park. So we were able to have a bagel and go and see the sights. We went to Harlem to try out soul food, which was amazing because that was again one of the main things on my bucket list. So we were able to still do all those things, mainly because I was realistic with the numbers. And one other tip I would definitely give, especially if you are going to somewhere like New York, is think about your transport, because I would definitely say out of the budget, we spent a good amount just on transport. And so especially when we were in New York, we decided to basically take the subway because we're from London. So it's very similar to the tube. I'm happy we did that because there was one time where we were going to see family and they were based in Brooklyn. And so I went to see how much an Uber would cost to get there. And since it was raining, guys, since it was raining, they were charging up to $200 to drive from Manhattan to New York, which is literally a 30-minute drive. And so my husband was obviously like, there is no way we are doing that. And so we decided to just get the subway, and the subway actually wasn't that bad. So again, another tip I would say is really think about your transport. Now, when we went from New York to Raleigh, North Carolina, that was also very different. So I had actually put a separate amount of money to spend for Raleigh versus New York, because I obviously knew that New York was going to be a lot more expensive and we weren't spending that much time in Raleigh. And mainly the reason why we went to Raleigh was because of the live event. With Raleigh, I would say the most expensive thing was actually travel. So in New York, obviously you would be walking a lot, or you could take the subway. I don't think we even took any kind of Ubers or Lyfts in New York actually at all. But with Raleigh, that was a totally different story, because they don't have subways. So you ended up having to get like your Ubers and Lyfts. So most of that money was spent on traveling, but I already knew that. So I took that into consideration, which is why I separated everything out. And I think that really, really helped us, because then we could see, okay, this is the budget that we have for New York and this is the budget that we have for Raleigh. And actually when we were in New York, we didn't end up spending as much money as we thought we would. So we had extra money to then spend in Raleigh. And then in Raleigh, obviously we did other things like go to the cinema, and obviously I went to my live event, which was absolutely amazing. And so it was 100% worth going on the trip just to actually see that live event. But I think one of the best things with this trip is the fact that I actually planned for it from a financial perspective, because that's something that I hadn't really done before. The last time I went on a trip was when I was basically in debt. So because of that, you know, I would usually just kind of not really think about how much things are going to cost. But for me, I think thinking about how much things are going to cost really helped us actually be free, because it meant that we had so much money to spend because I'd already thought about it in advance, if that makes sense. Okay, so now let's have a look at the total spend. So I have some numbers for you just to break it down in case you are, you know, interested, or maybe you're even thinking about going to New York as well. So in terms of the flight and hotel, so the flights plus the hotel we were staying in Times Square, so we booked that with British Airways, and that came to £1647, which I think is a similar amount in dollars, to be honest, at this moment in time. Then also separately we did the Airbnb in Raleigh, and so that came to £319.58. So in total for our flights and accommodation, that came to £1,966.58. Now obviously that wasn't the only thing we paid for, so I did allocate an amount for spending and travel, and so included in all of that we set aside an extra £1,000, plus we actually also had $370 with us, and that was just mainly from our wedding. People would be throwing dollars at us, so we decided to use some of that money to take that to America. And so we actually had $270 that we wanted to use as part of our spending, and so the other 100 we actually ended up using for tips, because obviously that's something that's quite important in America, and we were obviously aware of that, so we made sure we set aside money for that too. Now in terms of our spending, we actually ended up having some money left over. I think we had about £300 left by the time we were leaving Raleigh, North Carolina, and so we decided to pretty much spend some of that on duty free, obviously go and buy some presents for the family, and then also we put some of the rest in our sinking funds. So actually in terms of the way we budgeted, I think we did pretty well when it came to this holiday. All right, so now I want to just share some quick fire tips that I have written on my phone in case you are thinking of doing a trip, and also, you know, if you really want to make sure that it's not going to derail your other financial goals, here are some quick tips for you. So number one, book early. I was able to book it a good, I think at least 6 months in advance, and because of that, that obviously meant that we had a decent deal. The second thing I would say is find out if getting a package or booking separate is more cost effective. So for us, obviously we did the hybrid of the two, but you may find that booking separately for everything might be better for you, or just booking in the package might be better for you. So I would say just do your research and figure out what works best for you. The other tip I would give is, again, make a plan before you actually actually book the holiday. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people do is that they just book the holiday like as an impulse, and then they're thinking, oh, how am I actually going to pay for this? And sometimes they may end up having to use like credit card debt because they realize they can't actually save up for the holiday. So just make a plan before you book. That's what I did. I knew exactly how much we were going to save, how long it was going to take us, and obviously have a rough estimate of the costs as well. Another point, be realistic with your numbers. I think I've spoken about this a lot already. Don't just think about the flights and accommodation. What about, you know, traveling to the airport? Are you going to have to pay for travel when you get there? Are there things that you're going to be doing, like your hair or your nails? Think about things that are maybe outside the holiday that you might need to prepare for. Maybe just create a separate pot for this. This was something that I also did as well. Another tip is, again, you wouldn't be surprised, but know your budget. So the reason why we were able to save for this really quickly is because we knew our budget. We knew realistically how much we can save, and we also knew that this wouldn't derail us from our other financial goals because we know our budget very well. So that's something that you definitely want to think about if you haven't already. So if this all resonated with you and you're thinking, actually, I would absolutely love to be able to, you know, go on a trip and book trips, but I also still want to be able to save and invest for my other financial goals, and I'm not really sure how to do both, then make sure you do check out my one-on-one coaching, because what I do is actually help my clients map all of this out so they are able to, yes, go on their holidays, and they're also able to save and invest for their other financial goals, whether that be financial independence or simply just saving up for their first house as well. So make sure you do check that out. If you are interested, you can just book a free call to find out more. So I'll link more information up here for you and in the description below. So I feel like I've chatted a lot, but I hope this was useful. I really wanted to do this video because as a millennial myself, you know, we do really value those experiences and those trips. I think sometimes though, we just struggle to understand how we can put those trips as part of our financial goals so that we can still be able to save and invest for our future, but still be able to enjoy our today as well. And so I hope this video has helped you maybe understand how we've been able to do both. So if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments, do you have any trips coming up? Is there anything that you would take from this video when you're booking your next trip? I do post every Tuesday, so if you would like to know more, then of course you can subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys next week.